Wonderful to be here. I'm so glad that we are the free state of Florida. And we all have an opportunity to keep it that way on November 8th. Are you all going to make your voice heard? Well, it's wonderful to have these endorsements here today, and I think particularly on this day when we had the state-by-state unemployment numbers put out. Florida's unemployment rate is now 2.5%. That is the second lowest number ever recorded in the history of the state of Florida. We're 1 point below the national average. But what else is new? We've been outpacing the nation on almost everything for the last few years. And of course, part of the reason that was the case is because every governor had to make decisions about how they were going to look out for people over the past few years. And we saw some of these industries were totally shut down in other states. Construction, home building, all those other stuff. We didn't believe in doing that. We believed in lifting people up. We believed in protecting people's rights. We believed in making sure you had the ability to earn a living and that businesses had the ability to thrive. And yes, to make sure our kids could be in school in person 5 days a week. So because we did that, we were able to get people working. We were able to see our businesses thrive. And we've had more adjusted gross income move into this state since COVID hit than has ever moved into a single state in our country's history over a similar period of time. You look around the country when people are being ground down by mandates and restrictions and crime and taxes, the first place they think about going is escaping to the state of Florida. And I'm proud to have the endorsements. I think they told me that the truckers have never endorsed in 88 years. Is that true? First endorsement that they've ever made in 88 years is me. But you know, we understood. I mean, you remember when you had those images, I think it was probably at the end of last year, well, it's within the last year, of all these ships off the coast of California just sitting there. And, you know, we have our ports. Of course, they come in, then the truckers take it, sometimes rail, truck, whatever. And I was like, man, you know, we got more capacity. So we let it be known that our ports would do more, and they've done a lot more. We've had companies, like there was a company in Long Beach, moved to Jacksport because they knew they could depend on us. So we take a lot of pride in our logistics capability here in the state of Florida. Of course, the truckers are a huge part of that. One of the things that we did very strongly was when the Biden administration was threatening people to lose their jobs over the COVID shot. We said, not here, not on our watch. Nobody is going to have to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. So we fought the mandates and we beat the mandates. And how dumb is it that when we have a supply chain problem, when we have, thanks to the federal policies, the worst inflation that we've seen in 4 decades, interest rates now spiking, how dumb was it to want to have truckers lose their job in the midst of a crisis like this? But that's exactly what they were trying to do. So and there were many other people in the economy that would have affected as well. But you have a lot of folks in the trucking who've been doing it for a long time. And if they were going to be forced, they were going to do something else. That's what they had said that they were going to do. So we made sure to protect it, not only for their freedom, but for the health of our economy. It was not the right thing to do. And we've also been able to do, through our workforce initiatives, we've put in a lot of resources into commercial driver's license opportunities for people for training. When I became governor, we were producing as a state, I think about 700 or 800 commercial driver's licenses a year for people going through mostly our state colleges. Now, because of the investments we made, Florida's going to be producing 3,500 new truck drivers a year just right here in the state of Florida. And these are folks, I mean, you look at like Walmart, they're hiring truck drivers. They're doing $110,000 a year for their new truck drivers. And so these give people an opportunity. It's not an easy job. I mean, it requires, a lot of ability, but it gives people the opportunity to make really good money without having to go $100,000 in debt. People chasing some degree that in zombie studies, which is not going to do much for you. And so what we've been saying from the beginning is, with respect to education, is we want people to have an array of options. And I'm a believer in universities and colleges, but I'm not a believer in that at $150,000 debt. I don't think that that is worth it. I don't think that that's been good for this generation of students who've come through being told that they should mortgage their entire future just to get a sheet of paper. And so what we do in Florida, since I've been governor at our state universities, no tuition increases since I've been governor in the state of Florida. So you now have a situation where, they're a little bit different here or there, but basically, if you're in state, you can do state universities, University of Florida, Florida State. It's like $6,000, $6,300, depending on the university for tuition. You cannot find that anywhere else in these United States at those levels. And then we have scholarship programs like Bright Futures. You can get 100% of that, 75% of that, depending on the level that you're on. But even if you don't do that, you have the ability to get through without taking an exorbitant amount of debt. And oh, by the way, in Florida, because we have a lot of senior citizens, you as elderly, if you are grandparents, you can qualify your grandchild for in-state tuition in Florida. And so even if the family's living elsewhere, if you're living here, you can do that. So we're proud of doing that. And oh, by the way, they just had the rankings for public universities. University of Florida is now number 5 in the country for public universities. We used to not be that high. We used to be that high in football. That's not quite where we are now. But we weren't that high in academics. Now we are. So we're proud of that. Florida State's in the top 20, USF top 50. We're doing really well. Got more work to do. We're going to continue to do it. And I want people to have that opportunity. But I also know that 4-year brick and ivy degree is not the only way you can be successful in this life. And in fact, it's not the best way for a lot of people. So we've put an emphasis on workforce education. We've done a massive expansion of apprenticeships. You have students who will graduate high schools in Florida, including here in Hillsborough County. They will get certified in things like welding and electrical, and they have immediate job opportunities right off the bat. And then we've also worked with our state colleges, not just for truck driving, diesel mechanics. You have all these different things that are in very, very high demand. And so we just want to send the message that there's more than one way to succeed, and you going one route does not make you worse than somebody who went to a college. It's not the end-all, be-all. And especially in a growing state, and just understand, like, we've got like 22 million people, a lot of people. I am not out there begging for people to move here because we've got a lot of great folks. I mean, it is what it is. But the fact is, it's a free country, and people vote with their feet. And most of the states that have indulged in leftist policies are driving people to leave their states because they can't keep the streets safe. I mean, in San Francisco, they can't keep the streets clean. They will have defecation on the sidewalks. They have homeless everywhere. They have drugs everywhere. They have the stores being robbed and looted. It's a total disaster. And so that's why you see people fleeing those areas. And people are attracted to a state like Florida, partially because we were open, partially because we're a law and order state where we take public safety very seriously. It doesn't matter. All the stuff they do with the economy, you guys do, none of that matters if people aren't safe in their homes and in their communities. And we will never waver on public safety. So people look to that. They're also attracted to the way we run the state. If you look, we have the second lowest per capita tax burden at the state level in the United States. We have the second lowest debt per capita in the United States. We reduced taxes this year, $1.2 billion. We did, back to school holidays. We're now a gas tax holiday, so the truckers probably appreciate that because we have no state tax on gas. We did no sales tax on baby items like diapers and wipes and all those other stuff. We actually, when I became governor, my daughter was 2, my son was 9 months. We didn't even have our third yet. And it wasn't until my 4th year as governor that we did sales tax relief for baby items. And my wife said, "Why didn't you do that the first year you were governor?" You live and you learn. But what we're going to do, we've done big tax relief, and yet we have the largest budget surplus in the history of the state of Florida by a country mile. Not even close. And so people understand they will be treated well if they come here. They will be respected as taxpayers. Businesses understand that if you invest here, the state actually wants you to succeed. You try doing business in some of these other states, and it's like they want you to fail. So we've had people move manufacturing out of Northeast states, out of some Chicago area, bringing it down to the state of Florida. And it's like night and day in terms of doing business in some of those places and doing business here. And that ultimately means more opportunities for our folks down here in the state of Florida. So we're really excited about the progress that we've been able to make. Don't take anything for granted. I mean, I think if you think back to 4 years ago in our election, it was a very close race, I think a half a percentage point. And I can tell you, we didn't know there'd be COVID. We didn't know governors would do these perpetual lockdowns. But the fact is, had that gone the other way, this state would have been destroyed economically because you would have had California policies implemented here, and a lot of these people would have been out of business behind me. A lot of you may not have had jobs as a result. I can tell you the kids would not have gotten an education in school because they would have locked them out. So the stakes were very high. But if we were here 4 years ago and I told you, over the next 4 years there's going to be states in this country that forcibly close houses of worship but allow liquor stores and strip clubs to be open, you would have said no way. There's no way that could happen in the United States, and yet it did. And it would have been a lot worse if Florida had not been leading in the other direction. We set the ability and we set the standard. We are, though, because we are in a great place in terms of our fiscal policies, we have a large surplus. We're looking at, okay, what are the main issues economically that we're dealing with? And it's all being driven by bad federal policy. I mean, if you look at the inflation that we've seen, that was driven by excessive spending and borrowing and printing of money. And this was something that they were warned about back in 2021. You had economists that had worked for people like Obama and Clinton saying to Biden and the Congress, if you do this, you are going to set off a major inflation. Do not do this. You're doing too much. You're cranking the printing presses too much. And this is exactly what's ended up happening. And it really accelerated, it seemed, in September. Some of the stuff that you do are coming in so hot. Groceries, energy, all these things are at levels that we would not have thought possible just 2 years ago. And so we obviously don't control the Federal Reserve. We don't control the trillions and trillions that our Congress habitually churns out. But what we can do is say, okay, what can we do to make it a little bit easier for Floridians who are having to deal with the wages of this inflationary spiral that D.C. has thrown us into? So we're going to do a few things. One, we're going to do 50% reduction in tolls for all of our commuters statewide. Anyone that goes through toll facilities, if you're a commuter. Now, if you're a visitor and you're only doing it once, you're still going to pay. But if this is something you're doing for your job and stuff, you're going to get a rebate at the end of the month. And that's hundreds of dollars people will save. And actually, in some parts of the state, that'll be over $1,000. I mean, I know people in South Florida, they do $350 a month in tolls just driving around different areas. And so that's going to be a huge relief. We're looking forward to do that. We're also going to do our baby items and expand that. And what we're going to do is, in the state of Florida, for diapers, wipes, baby clothes, strollers, cribs. That is going to be permanently tax-free in the state of Florida. We're a family-friendly state. We want to continue to be a family-friendly state, and we want you to be able to raise your kids tax-free. And so that's what we're working to do, and I think we're going to do that and get that done. We're also going to do youth sports equipment. We're going to do more for children's books tax-free. We are going to do no tax on pet food for people so that they're able to save on the pet food. And because you think about it, when you have the inflationary period like you have, there's certain things that you may cut back on. You can make those decisions, but there's certain things you can't. I mean, you got to take care of the babies. You got to take care of your pets. And so these are expenses that you're going to have to do. So by removing those from sales tax, that's going to save people a lot of money. And so that's going to end up being probably about a $2.1 billion tax relief package, and I just did the largest in Florida history at $1.2 billion, so we're doing a lot more going forward, but we need to do that, and we need to make sure we're helping people. The other thing we're going to do is, so we have massive amount in a rainy day fund. We're going to put even more aside just to deal with whatever's going to happen with the economy, because I really think what Biden and they're doing in Washington, they are trying to plunge this country into a recession. I mean, there's just no way to say, like, you have this inflationary spiral and you're trying to crack down on American energy production. I mean, they should be wanting to produce more energy because the energy has been driving a lot of the inflation, yet they're not willing to do that. So they're inflating the money supply, they're overstimulating on fiscal while cracking down on production, which makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, just think about it. They're begging Maduro, please give us oil, Maduro. They're begging OPEC and Saudi, please don't cut production. And people will say, well, the Saudis are doing this for political reasons to go at Biden. You know what? They probably are doing that. But here's the thing, because Biden's playing footsie with Iran, that's their arch enemy. So I don't think Saudis like Biden. They may very well be doing that. But here's the thing. He's put this country in that vulnerable position by reducing our own capacity to produce. We were energy independent before he took office. And so he's put himself in this vulnerable position, not any of us. And so if he would just embrace our own productive capacity, we would not be in the pickle that we're in. But that is nevertheless what we see. So we're going to put billions more on top of the record rainy day fund just because we don't know what's going to happen. I think Florida is so well positioned that we'll do better than most states. You remember the Great Recession, we were one of the worst performing states during that recession. It was all about over-leveraged housing. When that bubble burst, you had a massive increase in unemployment, and you had real problems, and it took years to dig this state out of that mess. I think this time, we're well positioned. Our economy is much more diversified. We've got a lot more, investment income here. And so I think that we will do better than some of these other states. At the same time, we're not immune from what goes on. So it's best to prepare and to make sure to do it. So if something like that happens and you start seeing less revenue come in, I just plug from there, schools, infrastructure, whatever. We won't miss a beat. We won't miss a beat. We'll continue going forward. But I also understand that there's a need to do even more on infrastructure and to do more very quickly. We just had this terrible hurricane come through Southwest Florida, and it was coming through, and we knew that it was going to be something that was strong, but it even kind of picked up speed as it was doing. They were predicting a Category 4 going probably down to a 3 by the time it made the landfall. In reality, it just kept accelerating, was almost a 5. And so what that did, that knocked out 2 main bridges to these barrier islands, and the Pine Island Bridge and the Sanibel Causeway. So people wake up on Thursday morning and they look at this Pine Island Bridge, like the road was like washed away. Sanibel, it was severed in 3 different places between the mainland and the island. And basically what people were telling the residents at the time was, you guys need to get off these islands. There's no way we're going to be able to be out there to give the support that you need. So they came to me and they said, Governor, these are our homes. We don't want to leave the islands. They're telling us to leave. What can we do? Can you help us? I was like, yeah, we'll help you. So we looked and we said, okay, Pine Island, what can you do? Can you do boats? We were helicoptering and search and rescue from the beginning, but in terms of just normal life, trying to get people back on their feet, we're like, let's look at the bridge. Okay, what do we need to do? Can we do it? Yes, we can do it. How long is it going to take? Okay, let's do it even quicker than that. So we started off on the bridge. We set an ambitious agenda, an ambitious timeline that we would reconnect Pine Island to the mainland in 1 week. Well, we started it and finished it in 3 days, and so got that going. Sanibel. So as we're doing Pine Island, they say, can you do, because they were asking us, can you do some, a barge and this, and we were helicoptering in power workers, we were barging in trucks and everything. But honestly, that was not enough because you can only fit so many people on these things. You needed to get ground transportation back there. So we said, okay, we'll take it. And these are not state roads. I mean, these are not our roads or bridges. But we said, okay, well, we'll handle it. So we looked in, all right, we think we can do it and get it done in October, probably, maybe by the end of October. And so I was like, all right, we'll do it. Then I told the guys, I was like, I want to do it quicker than that. And so they start working like, okay, we're moving it up. We're going to do it on October 21st. And I'm like, okay, that's probably better than most people thought. But I was like, I want to do it a little quicker than that. So, all right, we'll see what we can do. So we were able on Wednesday, 3 weeks from the day that the hurricane came in and knocked it out in 3 locations, we were able to reopen it for civilian traffic 3 weeks after the fact. So, and the thing is, if people thought it was going to be 6 months to a year, if that would have happened, those islands would have died. They would have died, and that was not something that we wanted to see happen. So we did that, but it then occurred to me, okay, when we really push, we seem to be able to get some of this stuff done sooner. Actually, during COVID, when COVID first hit, a lot of the employees were going remote work and they were working from home. So the traffic started to really go down on the roads. And so we had our FDOT accelerate projects, including here in Tampa, I-4, some of those others in Orlando, and said, okay, so they were able to close more lanes, do more work around the clock, and they've finished a lot of those projects way ahead of schedule. So this stuff can be done. So I'm looking to say, okay, we have this work project for infrastructure program, good, it's great, but what more can we be doing? So we're working on, probably have some announcement. I probably would have announced this by now if it weren't for being down in Southwest Florida so much, but we are going to do kind of an infrastructure moonshot where we take some of the areas of the state that have a lot of congestion because of our growth and tourists and all that stuff, and say, let's start these things soon and let's finish them soon. So stay tuned for that. But that'll be multi-billion dollars on top of what we're already doing for Florida's infrastructure. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for a lot of people. We're also going to continue to work very hard on education, yes, workforce education, but just the fact, if you think about it, that we work so hard to have the kids in school this whole time, you're going to see when they do these state-by-state results for the nation's report card that we will have done so much better than these lockdown states with our kids' performance, because you just can't learn right being on Zoom for a year and a half. It doesn't work that way. So we thought that that was very important. I had a lot of opposition when we were doing that back in 2020. And you see somebody like Fauci now, and he's saying he never supported closing schools. He's actually saying that. That is just false. He attacked me for having schools open. Are you kidding me? But I think the fact that he's saying that, the fact that he claims he never advocated lockdowns, even though he criticized Florida, and actually said the summer of 2020, we had COVID wave, first main COVID wave, and people are telling me, close the state. I had a letter written to me from all the Democrat members of the U.S. Congress in mid-July saying, you must shut down Florida. I rejected that. I kept it open, and but when they were doing it, he was saying that Florida needed to do this as well, or saying that they really need to think about doing that. And so, but the fact that he's now rewriting history, what that tells us is that's his way. He's never going to admit he was wrong, but that's their way of kind of distancing themselves from the catastrophic damage that those policies inflicted on people throughout this country. You cannot look at the learning loss that we see in states like California and Chicago and all these other places and say that that was somehow good. Because you can look at states like Florida and you can look at other states and see they had the kids in school. And so how are you going to be able to rationalize that? They cannot rationalize it. But the danger is they're not admitting that they're wrong, and so that's something that they may be willing to do again in the future. And so that's why when I saw this thing with the CDC adding COVID shots to the childhood immunization schedule, they are doing that, and that is going to be a pretext for states throughout this country to mandate that on school children. Some already do. D.C. is trying to do it. Some of the California is trying to do it. And I saw this as something that was likely to be a push at some point. So I had the legislature ban mandates for school children in the state of Florida for COVID shots. That's your decision as a parent.